There's a specific type of man that societies throughout history have desperately tried to eliminate, not through direct confrontation, but through subtle psychological warfare designed to make him doubt his own power. Niccolò Machiavelli spent his life studying these men, the ones who refuse to bow to consensus, who write their own moral code, who operate by principles that make comfortable people deeply uncomfortable. And what he discovered will change how you see every power structure around you. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince something that got him banned, criticized, and feared for 5 centuries. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But that's not even his most dangerous insight. His most dangerous revelation was this: the man who lives by his own rules, who refuses to be domesticated by society's manufactured morality, who understands that power is the only real currency in human interaction. This man doesn't just threaten individual people. He threatens the entire system that keeps the majority compliant, obedient, and psychologically enslaved. Stay with me because in the next 20 minutes I'm going to show you exactly why men who live by their own rules terrify the world, how the system tries to break them, and what separates the ones who survive from the ones who get crushed. Walk down any street in any city right now and you'll see them everywhere. Men who have surrendered their individual will to collective programming. Men who work jobs they hate because that's what responsible people do. Men who silence their authentic opinions because disagreement is uncomfortable. Men who've traded their dangerous potential for social acceptance and call it maturity. These men look at someone who lives by his own rules and they don't see freedom. They see threat. They don't see courage. They see recklessness. They don't see authenticity. They see arrogance. And their reaction isn't random, it's deeply psychological. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago when he wrote The Prince as a manual for how power actually works versus how people pretend it works. He said, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see but few can feel." Translation: most people respond to appearances, not reality, to performance, not truth, to what makes them comfortable, not what's actually effective. And the man who lives by his own rules? He shatters the comfortable illusions that keep the masses docile. Before we go deeper into why this terrifies people, I'm building something here, and I want to know where the free thinkers are watching from. Drop your city in the comments because this philosophy is creating a global network of men who refuse to be controlled by consensus morality. And I want to see how widespread this awakening really is. Here's what Machiavelli discovered that makes his work so controversial even today. Morality as taught by society isn't about making you a good person. It's about making you a controlled person. The rules you're told to follow: be humble, seek approval, never make waves, prioritize others over yourself, wait your turn, respect authority simply because it's authority. These aren't moral guidelines. They're psychological chains designed to keep you from accessing your real power. Machiavelli wrote, "A man who wishes to act entirely up to his professions of virtue soon meets with what destroys him among so much that is evil." What's he saying? If you actually follow all the moral rules society tells you to follow, if you're completely honest, completely selfless, completely humble, completely deferential, you will be destroyed by people who don't follow those rules, but pretend they do. The world is run by people who understand that power matters more than perception, by people who smile while calculating, by people who speak about values while pursuing advantages. And when you refuse to play that game, when you openly live by your own rules instead of pretending to follow theirs, you become dangerous because you've exposed the lie that everyone else is invested in maintaining. Think about every institution you interact with. Your workplace preaches teamwork and collaboration, but promotes the people who strategically take credit and eliminate threats. Your government talks about serving the people, but operates through backroom deals and calculated manipulation. Your social circles claim to value authenticity, but punish anyone who's too honest about uncomfortable truths. Your family celebrates unconditional love, but applies massive pressure to conform to their expectations. Everywhere you look, there's a gap between the stated values and the actual operating principles. And most people never notice this gap because they're too busy trying to follow the stated values. But the man who lives by his own rules, he sees through it immediately. He recognizes that the game being played is not the game being described, and once he sees it, he can't unsee it. Machiavelli called this understanding virtù, which doesn't mean virtue in the modern sense. Virtù means the capacity to do whatever the situation requires regardless of conventional morality. It means having the strength to act on reality, not on how you wish reality was. And men with virtù terrify the world because they're not bound by the same psychological programming that controls everyone else. Let me tell you about someone we'll call Alexander. Alexander graduated from an elite university, had every advantage, was groomed for a prestigious career path in corporate law. Everyone expected him to follow the script, join a top firm, make partner, build wealth, maintain respectability. For 3 years, he played the game perfectly. Then something shifted. He started seeing the gap between what the firm said it valued and what it actually rewarded. They talked about integrity but promoted the lawyers who bent ethical rules. They preached work-life balance but punished anyone who actually tried to have a life. They celebrated diversity of thought but silenced any perspective that challenged the status quo. Alexander realized he had 2 choices: keep pretending the stated values were real and slowly die inside, or start operating by his own rules and face the consequences. He chose the latter. He started taking only cases he actually believed in, turning down lucrative clients whose positions he found morally bankrupt. He stopped working weekends, refusing to sacrifice his personal development for billable hours. He began openly disagreeing with senior partners in meetings, pointing out the hypocrisies everyone else pretended not to see. Within 6 months, the Whisper campaign started. He's not a team player, he's difficult. He's not committed to the firm. He lacks judgment. Notice none of these criticisms were about his legal work, which was excellent. They were about his refusal to follow the unspoken rules that keep the system functioning. Within a year, Alexander was pushed out. But here's what's fascinating. He wasn't devastated, he was liberated. He started his own practice, taking cases the big firms wouldn't touch because they were too controversial or not profitable enough. He built a reputation as someone who couldn't be bought or controlled, and slowly clients who valued that independence started seeking him out. 10 years later, Alexander makes less money than he would have as a corporate partner, but he's built something far more valuable, a life lived entirely on his own terms. He sleeps perfectly because he never has to pretend to believe things he doesn't believe. He has real relationships because people know exactly who he is. And he has power, not institutional power but personal power, the kind Machiavelli wrote about when he said, "It is better to be a protagonist of your own story than a supporting character in someone else's." But here's what makes Alexander's story instructive. The system tried everything to break him. They attacked his reputation. They questioned his judgment. They withdrew opportunities. They made him feel isolated. And if he had been psychologically weaker, if he hadn't understood that their attacks were proof he was threatening their control, he would have broken. He would have apologized, conformed, gotten back in line. That's what happens to most men who try to live by their own rules. They're not prepared for how vicious the response will be. Machiavelli understood this psychological warfare intimately because he lived it. He was a diplomat and political philosopher in Renaissance Florence, serving the Republic faithfully. Then the Medici family returned to power, and Machiavelli, being associated with the old regime, was tortured and imprisoned. When he was released, he was banned from political life, exiled to his farm. And it was there, in that forced isolation, that he wrote The Prince, a book so honest about how power actually works that it got him condemned as immoral, as the teacher of evil, as someone corrupting political thought. But Machiavelli wasn't teaching evil. He was teaching reality. He was saying, stop pretending that the people in power got there by being good and moral and virtuous. They got there by understanding how power works and being willing to do what others won't do. And the man who lives by his own rules must understand this same dynamic. The world will call you arrogant for refusing to submit. They'll call you selfish for prioritizing your authentic path. They'll call you dangerous for exposing the contradictions in their moral programming. And all of those attacks are actually compliments disguised as criticisms because they're admitting you can't be controlled. Here's what Machiavelli wrote that explains why this dynamic exists. Men are so simple and yield so readily to the desires of the moment that he who will trick will always find another who will suffer to be tricked. Most people want to be tricked. They want to believe in the comfortable lies. They want to think that following the rules will lead to success, that being a good person guarantees good outcomes, that the system rewards merit and punishes wrongdoing. These beliefs make life psychologically easier. The man who lives by his own rules threatens these comfortable beliefs simply by existing. His success proves you don't need their approval. His independence proves you don't need their system. His authenticity proves you don't need their masks. And that's terrifying to people who've built their entire identity around conforming to expectations they never questioned. So they attack him. Not because he's wrong, because he's threatening. Not because he's immoral, because he follows a different moral code than the one they use to control others. But there's a crucial distinction that Machiavelli makes that most people miss when they criticize his work. Living by your own rules doesn't mean having no rules. It means consciously choosing your principles based on what you genuinely believe serves your highest vision, not blindly accepting the principles that society programs into you. Machiavelli wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." Why does this matter for men living by their own rules? Because intelligence means surrounding yourself with people who strengthen your vision, not people who dilute it to make it acceptable to the masses. The man living by his own rules carefully selects his inner circle. He doesn't keep people around because of history or obligation or social expectation. He keeps people who genuinely support his authentic path, or he walks alone. And this selectivity terrifies people because it means he can't be influenced through social pressure. You can't shame him by threatening to withdraw your friendship because he's already decided your friendship is conditional and therefore worthless. You can't manipulate him by appealing to what everyone thinks because he doesn't value everyone's opinion. You can't control him through group consensus because he's not looking for consensus. He's executing his vision. Let me show you how this plays out in modern context. You know that guy who started his own business while everyone told him to keep his stable job? That's living by his own rules. You know that person who moved to a different country to pursue an unconventional path while everyone said it was irresponsible? That's living by their own rules. You know that man who ended a long-term relationship everyone approved of because he knew deep down it wasn't right, despite having no logical reason to leave? That's living by his own rules. And in every case, what happened? The people around them panicked, because these decisions can't be understood through conventional risk analysis. They only make sense if you understand that some men value authenticity more than security, growth more than comfort, and self-determination more than approval. Machiavelli would recognize these men immediately as possessing virtù, the quality of doing what the situation requires based on your own assessment, not what others think you should do. But here's where it gets psychologically complex. The world doesn't just attack men who live by their own rules through direct criticism. That's too obvious and too easy to dismiss. Instead, the attack is far more subtle and far more effective. They use what Machiavelli called the appearance of mercy, which is actually the weapon of control. Here's how it works. When you start living by your own rules, people who want to control you will express concern. They'll say they're worried about you. They'll frame their attempts to pull you back into conformity as care, as love, as not wanting to see you make mistakes. And this is devastating to most men because it's wrapped in apparent goodness. How do you fight someone who claims they're just trying to help you? How do you resist pressure that presents itself as protection? Machiavelli warned about this exact tactic. He wrote, "Men ought either to be well treated or crushed because they can avenge themselves of lighter injuries, of more serious ones they cannot." Translation: if someone is going to oppose you, they'll either do it overtly, which you can defend against, or they'll do it covertly under the guise of helping you, which is far more dangerous, because you can't defend yourself without looking ungrateful or paranoid. Think about the last time you made an unconventional decision. How many people responded with, "I just want to make sure you've thought this through. I'm worried you might be making a mistake. Have you considered what could go wrong? I'm only saying this because I care about you." Every one of those statements is a psychological manipulation designed to make you doubt yourself. Because if they really cared about your authentic path, they would ask different questions. They would ask, "What vision are you pursuing? How can I support your decision, even if I don't fully understand it? What do you need to make this work?" But they don't ask those questions because they're not actually concerned about your well-being. They're concerned about your deviation from the script. Your independent choice threatens their worldview that says following the rules is the only safe path. So they attack your decision while claiming to protect you. And most men cave under this pressure because they can't distinguish between genuine concern and manipulative control. Machiavelli gives you the framework to see through this manipulation. He says, "Judge people by their actions, not their stated intentions." If someone claims they care about you, but their actions consistently try to limit your growth, control your choices, or make you feel guilty for pursuing your authentic path, they don't care about you. They care about keeping you in a role that serves their psychological needs. The man who lives by his own rules must be ruthless about this distinction. Not cruel, but ruthless. Ruthless in his assessment of who genuinely supports his vision versus who's trying to domesticate him. And when he makes that assessment accurately and acts on it, cutting off people who drain his energy or try to control him, the world calls him cold, calculating, Machiavellian in the negative sense. But Machiavelli would say, "Better to be called cold and remain free than to be called warm, while living in a cage of other people's expectations." Here's another layer that Machiavelli understood about power that applies directly to men living by their own rules. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." This is crucial. The man who lives by his own rules must understand that most people will never understand him. They'll project their fears, their limitations, their interpretations onto his choices. And he cannot waste energy trying to make them understand because understanding requires a frame of reference they don't have. If someone has never prioritized authenticity over security, they literally cannot comprehend why you would make that choice. If someone has never valued growth over comfort, they will interpret your pursuit of challenge as self-punishment. If someone has never experienced the suffocation of living according to someone else's script, they will see your independence as rebellion for rebellion's sake. Machiavelli's advice? Let them misunderstand you. Don't exhaust yourself trying to justify your path to people who don't have the context to appreciate it. Save your energy for execution, not explanation. But there's a warning that comes with this territory, and Machiavelli is brutally honest about it. He wrote, "It is necessary for him who lays out a state and arranges laws for it to presuppose that all men are evil, and that they are always going to act according to the wickedness of their spirits whenever they have free scope." Now that sounds dark and cynical, but here's what he really means. Don't be naive about human nature. People will generally act in their self-interest, especially when they think they can get away with it. This doesn't make them evil, it makes them human. But the man who lives by his own rules must understand this dynamic, so he's not shocked when people betray him, when allies become enemies, when support turns to sabotage. Not because people are inherently bad, but because your independence threatens their psychological equilibrium, and humans will sacrifice others to maintain their own comfort. Let me tell you about Marcus, different from the earlier story, who learned this lesson the hard way. Marcus built a successful consulting business by doing things differently than his competitors. He was transparent about pricing when others used bait-and-switch tactics. He told clients hard truths they needed to hear when others told them what they wanted to hear. He maintained strict boundaries around his time when others were available 24/7. His approach worked. Clients loved his integrity and his results. But his competitors hated him because he made them look bad by comparison. They couldn't attack his work, so they attacked his character. They spread rumors that he was difficult to work with, They suggested to potential clients that his confidence was actually arrogance. They formed informal alliances to exclude him from industry events and opportunities. And initially, Marcus was shocked. He thought if he did good work and operated with integrity, people would respect that. But that's not how it works. Machiavelli would tell Marcus, "They don't hate you because you're doing something wrong. They hate you because you're exposing that they're doing something wrong. Your authenticity makes their pretense visible. Your independence makes their conformity look like cowardice, and they will punish you for that." But here's where Marcus made the crucial decision that separates men who survive living by their own rules from men who get broken by it. He didn't try to win back the people attacking him. He didn't compromise his principles to make them comfortable. He didn't apologize for being different. Instead, he doubled down. He became even more transparent about his approach. He started publicly discussing the industry practices he disagreed with. He built his own network of clients and colleagues who valued integrity over politics. And gradually, something interesting happened. The attacks continued, but they stopped mattering. Because Marcus had built a foundation of real relationships and genuine value that couldn't be undermined by gossip. Machiavelli wrote about this principle. He who builds on the people builds on mud. But Marcus wasn't building on the people, meaning the masses. He was building on principles and the specific individuals who genuinely aligned with those principles. That's unshakable. The man who lives by his own rules must build his foundation on his own values, and the select few who truly understand him, not on popularity or consensus. Now let's address the question that's probably emerging. Is living by your own rules just selfishness disguised as philosophy? This is the criticism that gets thrown at Machiavelli constantly, that he's teaching selfishness, manipulation, amorality. But that's a complete misunderstanding of his work. Machiavelli isn't saying ignore everyone else and only care about yourself. He's saying understand how power actually works so you're not naive and powerless. He's saying create your own moral framework based on reality, not fantasy. He's saying be strategic about how you pursue your vision in a world that will resist you. None of that is selfish. What's actually selfish is demanding that someone live according to your expectations because their independence makes you uncomfortable. What's actually manipulative is using guilt and social pressure to control someone's choices. What's actually immoral is pretending to have values you don't actually follow, while punishing others for being honest about their principles. The man who lives by his own rules isn't rejecting morality. He's rejecting the specific moral framework that society uses to control people who threaten the status quo. He's creating his own code based on what he genuinely believes is right, not what he's been programmed to believe is right. And here's what's fascinating. When you study men throughout history who lived by their own rules, you find they often operated by incredibly strict personal codes. They just weren't the codes that society approved of. Machiavelli himself, despite writing The Prince, which advocates ruthless pragmatism, was by all accounts a loyal friend, a devoted father, and someone who maintained his principles even when tortured. His code just didn't match the sanitized version of morality that powerful people use to control the masses. He believed in effectiveness over appearance, in reality over illusion, in personal strength over dependent weakness, and those beliefs made him dangerous to people invested in the opposite values. Here's a test that Machiavelli would give you to determine if you're actually living by your own rules or just pretending to, while still being controlled by consensus. Ask yourself, what would I do differently in my life if I knew for certain that no one would judge me, no one would criticize me, no one would be disappointed in me, and no one would even know about my choices? If your answer involves significant changes, then you're not living by your own rules yet. You're living by a modified version of their rules. The man truly living by his own rules doesn't need the hypothetical removal of judgment to make authentic choices, because he's already internally free from caring about that judgment. He's made peace with being misunderstood, with being criticized, with standing alone when necessary. And that internal freedom is what terrifies the world more than any specific action he takes. Because internal freedom can't be taken away through external pressure. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. There's a concept Machiavelli discusses about power that he calls maintaining the state. He's talking about political leadership, but it applies perfectly to men maintaining their individual sovereignty. He says you must be willing to act against your natural inclination when the situation requires it. What does that mean for living by your own rules? It means sometimes maintaining your independence requires you to be ruthlessly honest when kindness would be easier. It means sometimes you have to cut off relationships that others think you should maintain. It means sometimes you have to make decisions that look harsh or cold from the outside, but are necessary to protect your authentic path. Most men aren't willing to pay this price. They want to live by their own rules, but also be liked by everyone, approved of by their family, respected by their peers. And Machiavelli would say, choose one. You can have authentic independence or universal approval, but you cannot have both. This is why men who live by their own rules terrify the world, not because they're violent or destructive or malicious, because they've achieved a form of psychological freedom that most people can't even imagine. They've broken the invisible chains of social approval. They've stopped using other people's opinions as their moral compass. They've built lives based on their own assessment of what matters, rather than inheriting someone else's values. And every time someone sees that freedom in action, it forces them to confront their own captivity. It raises questions they've been avoiding. Am I living my own life or performing someone else's expectations? Are my choices authentically mine or responses to social pressure? Do I have my own rules or am I just following theirs? These questions are terrifying because answering them honestly might require massive life changes that feel impossible. So instead of facing those questions, people attack the messenger. They attack the man living by his own rules. They call him selfish, arrogant, dangerous, immoral. They create elaborate justifications for why his way of being is wrong and their way of being is right. They band together in their conformity and collectively condemn his independence. Machiavelli saw this pattern everywhere throughout history. He wrote, "For the great majority of mankind are satisfied with appearances as though they were realities, and are often more influenced by the things that seem than by those that are. The masses prefer comfortable illusions to uncomfortable truths, and the man living by his own rules is a walking uncomfortable truth. His very existence proves that the rules are optional, that independence is possible, that you don't have to live the way they insist everyone must live. That's not just threatening, that's revolutionary. And revolutions, even personal, individual, quiet revolutions, make people nervous. But here's what Machiavelli would want you to understand as you consider whether to live by your own rules. The price is high, but the alternative is higher. Yes, you'll face criticism. Yes, you'll lose relationships that aren't strong enough to handle your authenticity. Yes, you'll feel isolated at times. Yes, you'll question yourself. Yes, the world will try to break you. But the alternative is living your entire life as someone else's version of who you should be. The alternative is reaching the end of your life and realizing you never actually lived it, you just performed it. The alternative is dying with your real self still trapped inside, wondering what could have been, if you'd had the courage to let it out. Machiavelli understood this trade-off intimately. He chose to write The Prince honestly, knowing it would destroy his reputation, knowing people would call him evil, knowing his ideas would be condemned. He could have written a sanitized version that everyone would approve of, but he chose truth over approval. And 500 years later, we're still reading his work while the sanitized versions of his contemporaries are forgotten. That's the ultimate power of living by your own rules. You create something authentic that lasts. Whether that's a body of work or a life well lived or relationships built on genuine connection or simply the internal peace of knowing you were true to yourself. None of those things are possible when you're living by someone else's script. They require the courage that Machiavelli called virtù. The strength to see reality clearly, to act according to your genuine assessment rather than others' expectations, to remain standing when everyone else wants you to kneel. The world will always try to domesticate dangerous men. That's not going to change. But you can decide whether you'll be domesticated or whether you'll remain dangerous. whether you'll follow their rules or create your own, whether you'll live for their approval or for your authentic becoming. This video probably hit you differently than anything you've watched recently because it's giving you permission for something you've wanted but were afraid to claim: the right to live by your own rules. That desire has been there quietly growing every time you made a choice that felt wrong but looked right to everyone else. Write in the comments right now, "I write my own rules," because that declaration is your first act of sovereignty. It's you telling yourself and everyone watching that you refuse to be controlled by consensus morality any longer. When I see those words, I know you're serious about walking the Machiavellian path, not just theorizing about it. Subscribe to this channel immediately, because you need constant reinforcement that your independence matters more than their comfort. Every video we create is designed to strengthen your psychological sovereignty against a world that wants you compliant. Hit that like button, not just for the algorithm, but as a public statement that you value truth over pleasant lies, that you're willing to face how power actually works, rather than how people pretend it works. We're building a movement of modern Machiavellians who understand that living by your own rules isn't rebellion. It's the only form of authentic existence available to conscious men. The next video reveals the specific psychological tactics that systems use to break men who threaten their control, and more importantly, the counter strategies that let you remain standing when everyone else wants you to submit. You need this information before they deploy these tactics against you, because they will the moment you start living authentically. The deepest truths about maintaining power in a world designed to strip it from you are waiting for those brave enough to keep watching.